And now, marine weather around Alaska.
For tonight's weather, we've got scattered thunderstorms here in the interior, slowly diminishing, especially after midnight. A weakening system here out over the Bering Sea, still close enough though to keep some light rain at times going along the southwest coast here. And winds slowly diminishing as well. And then this front extends down and merges up with another system coming up toward the western Aleutians there for a general area of rain from the Unalaska Island area on out to the west. High pressure, dry, light winds, a lot of low clouds here in the Gulf of Alaska up into Prince William Sound and southern Cook Inlet. Mostly dry for the Panhandle. And then for tomorrow, mostly dry for the southeast coast, maybe some showers developing over toward the eastern border, but most of that moisture staying in Canada. And thunderstorms and afternoon thunderstorms here in the interior again on up into the western central Brooks Range and portions of the North Slope with hot temperatures again, well into the 80s here from the North Slope down into the central and eastern interior. Cooler down to the south, mostly in the 70s. And out to the west, cooler yet, mostly in the 60s there. Still some lingering showers now over the southwest interior, and still a chance of rain along the southwest coast as this system continues to weaken over the Bering Sea. This system spreads rain up to the western Alaska Peninsula. And then for Saturday, that system continues sliding eastward with rain now pushing into Bristol Bay in the southern Kuskokwim Delta area and even Kodiak Island. Look for thunderstorms over the Brooks Range into the North Slope area. Otherwise, farther to the north, sunny, and then you might get into some low clouds and fog along the Arctic coast. Isolated thunderstorms here across southern Alaska, and still quite warm in the 80s, mid to upper in some cases to near 90 over the east side of the state, north of the Alaska Range. And another pretty good day here with some scattered isolated shower or thunderstorm activity here, mainly over the mountainous terrain of southern Alaska, and a weak trough here brings some showers into the southeast coast. Coastal water forecasts, south coast of the Panhandle, southeast winds 10 to 20 knots for the day on Friday, east-southeast at 10 for the central coast, and quite light and variable for the north coast at 5 to 10 knots. Light variable winds for Lynn Canal, southeast at 10 for Stevens Passage, and southeast 15 for Clarence Strait. And the day Saturday, south coast, that'll be the windiest area, or southeast winds 15 to 20 knots, east at 10 on the central coast, and a light east-northeast breeze at 10 on the north coast. Southeast at 10 for Lynn Canal, east at 10 for Stevens Passage, and Clarence Strait, southeast breeze at 15 knots. Prince William Sound, the North Gulf Coast, Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, variable winds at 10 knots for Friday. Cook Inlet south at 10 knots. And for the day Saturday, Cook Inlet southwest at 10, 3-foot seas here for the inlet. And east winds kicking up to 25 knots for the Barren Islands, otherwise Kamishak Bay southeast at 20. North Gulf Coast east to southeast winds 15 to 20 knots, and Prince William Sound light variable winds at 10 knots with seas 2 feet or less. Kodiak Island light variable winds at 10 knots with 2 to 4 foot seas for Friday. And the Alaska Peninsula, south to southeast winds 15 to 20 knots, southeast about 15 for Bristol Bay. And for Saturday, Alaska Peninsula, east to south winds at 20 knots, seas running 3 to 8 feet. East winds at 20 knots with 3-foot seas for Bristol Bay, and southeast to northeast winds around Kodiak Island 15 to 20 knots. Eastern Aleutians, southeast winds 15 to 25 knots, and Adak and Atka, variable winds 10 to 15 knots, and north to northwest winds at 20 knots for the western islands. And then for Saturday, west to southwest winds at 20 to 30 knots for the western Aleutians, mostly west at 20 knots for Adak and Atka Islands, and for the eastern Aleutians, west to southwest winds 20 to 25 knots. And the southwest coast tomorrow, south winds 25 knots, 5 to 6 foot seas, southeast at 20 for St. Lawrence Island with 4-foot seas, and east winds at 25 knots for St. Matthew Island, St. Paul and St. George, south at 20. And for Saturday, Pribilof Islands, light variable winds at 10 knots with 4-foot seas, northeast at 20 for St. Matthew Island, east at 20 for the Kuskokwim Delta Coast, Yukon Delta Coast and St. Lawrence Island, east winds at 10 knots. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, east winds tomorrow at 15 knots, and for the central coast, northeast at 10. And western Arctic coast, north winds 5 to 10 knots, south at 10 for the Chukchi Sea. And for Saturday, mostly northwest winds for the Chukchi Sea at 15 knots. Otherwise, the western Arctic coast, light west winds at 10 knots, northwest at 10 for the central coast, and the east side, northwest at 15 knots.